Okay. There's the gavel. Okay. Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Town of Rocky Hill Open Space and Conservation Commission regular meeting for Wednesday, April 12th, 2023. I'd like to go ahead and start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay. Do we have anybody from the public here? I don't think so. Okay. Item 4, applications for permits. Brook Street, Rocky Hill LLC, construction of parking area, portion of building, retaining wall, level spreader, and grading located at 553, 565, and 595 Brook Street. Assessor's ID number 17-004, 17-005, and 16-278. And it's all yours, Jim.
Good. It's not high enough. Good evening. For the record, my name is Jim Cassidy, professional engineer and principal with the firm of Halsey, Pearson, and Cassidy. Do you need the screen down also, or your individual monitors okay?
We're good.
Okay. So I'm back here before you this evening representing the property owners of a piece of land located at 553, 565, 593, 595 Brook Street. It's Brook Street, Rocky Hill LLC is the owner of the property. Last time we were before you, what we did is we presented a plan of proposed development of this property consisting of 5 buildings for a total footprint area of 120,000 square feet. If you recall, we had 2 30,000 square foot buildings to the front and 3 20,000 square foot buildings to the rear. The first slide I had up was basically an existing condition photo, just to refresh everybody's memory. On this photo, north is up, Brook Street is to the south on the bottom. The area outlined in yellow is the overall property, consisting of about 13.37 acres. You see on the far north end, there is a wetlands area. This is a wetlands area associated with Dividend Brook. And then the red line represents the 100-foot upland review area from that wetlands area. The majority of the site is presently clear, other than the center portion. It's a past tree farm, and there's still remnants of the trees out there. The northern portion is primarily wooded with deciduous. It's a wooded swamp along the edge of the wetlands or the watercourse on that portion of the property. And then on the bottom right or to the southeast, there is an existing residence located at 553. It's a 2-story residence. There's a garage to the rear of it, tennis court and an orchard to the back of the house, and in the far back there's a garage that's kind of buried in the woods there. As I mentioned last time we were before you, see if I can zoom in a little bit. Excuse me. Last time we were before you, this is the plan that we presented. Again, just to reiterate, it was for 5 buildings, a total footprint of 120,000 square feet. The 2 buildings to the front were 30,000 with associated parking areas in front of it between the front building line and Brook Street, and then the 3 20,000 square foot buildings to the rear. You asked me to go back and to take another look at this site and to see if there was anything I could do, because we had an area of about 13,000 square feet of activity in the upland review area for the construction of buildings number 3 and 4, a portion of the driveway, and we're also proposing a retaining wall in that area that had the overall activity for that portion of the project consisted of about 13,592 square feet. In addition to on this plan, we had a stormwater management basin at the upper left corner. It's basically set outside the 100-foot upland review area, but by the time we're done with some final grading and then the creation of an outlet for that portion of the project, we did have a minor activity in the upland review area consisting of about 4,370 square feet. In the plan package you have, we did go back and we did revisit the site. We worked with our soil scientists and environmentalists Davidson Environmental to see if there was something we can do to reduce the impacts in the upland review area. What we've done is we've taken buildings number 3 and 4. We combined them, so now they are a 40,000 square foot building instead. We ran them parallel to the Brook Street. So what happens is by the time we pull back the paved areas to the rear of it, the red line once again represents the 100-foot upland review area. What we find is that we don't have any pavement, any grading, or any activity for the development of that building, now building number 3, within that 100-foot upland review area. In addition to, on the site plans that were submitted, if I blow up a little bit on this, sorry. Go on, computer. Screen's gonna be a little temperamental on me. If you actually look at your site plans and also on the screen, you also see beyond the red line it's a light brown orangish color line. What we actually did is we physically went out and we surveyed the tree canopy. In addition to, we located all the trunks of the trees associated with that. That brown line represents the limits of the trunk line. So you'll see is that there's actually no clearing of trees that's actually required. There's only some minor trimming of the canopy associated with the development of this site. On the northwest corner of the project, we are still proposing to implement the stormwater basin, but with this new configuration of the site, it allowed us an additional opportunity to make a larger stormwater basin. So you're going to see a second area to the center. It's going to be very similar to the way it worked before, where there's going to be a couple infiltration basins. There'll be one infiltration basin to the west or to the left of Building 3. There's an infiltration swale along the front. If I go to the next page, which is my drainage page, all the catch basins that would collect water from the parking areas, all the roof leaders would either discharge to the infiltration basin that's to the west of Building 3, and eventually, through an outlet structure, then discharge to the 2 basins that are to the back. These basins are, I would say, more than adequately sized at this point. As I mentioned, we are proposing that a significant amount of the groundwater will actually infiltrate back into the ground by adding this additional capacity. We're actually able to achieve additional stormwater infiltrating back into the ground. So let me just skip a couple pages here. In the basin itself, I think Commissioner Stevens had a question about any testing or results of soil testing we had in those basins. We added an additional sheet to the plan set with all the test pits that we performed on this. In the stormwater basin itself, the 2 primary test pits that were done in those basins were number 11 and number 12. In particular, number 12, this one was actually done at the lowest existing elevation in the basin, which ranges from about elevation 135 to 134. You can see our total depth in this basin was about 96 inches, so about 8 feet in depth, which brings the bottom of that pit down to about elevation 128 to 127. The bottom of our proposed infiltration basin is at 131, so it's about 4 feet higher than the bottom of the pit we actually dug. In addition to, in all the pits, and town staff was out there and can verify, we did not encounter any groundwater, or we did not encounter any modeling in any of the test pits that were out there. In addition to, we obtained soil samples from a few of the test pits. We sent them off to Whitestone to have a permeability test done on the soil samples. This is a result of the rates that we received for a permeability test. It ranged anywhere from about 9.5 down to about 5.6 inches per hour. In designing our stormwater management system, we did take credit for infiltration, but as recommended in DEP Stormwater Quality Manual, we put a safety factor in and we cut the 5.6 in half. So we used 2.8 as an infiltration rate for our basin. And with running stormwater models on that basin, what we find is that we can almost infiltrate everything up to a 25-year storm event. There's actually no outlet up to a 25-year storm event. Larger storm events would have a discharge. But for the overall model, We find post-development, there's no increase in flow out of the basin through the level spreader before it goes to the adjoining wetlands area. Skip. Another question that was brought up in past meetings was the sequencing of this site. What I represented previously is we had originally talked about doing one building at a time. I talked to the developer, and he's actually proposing to do basically all the project at one time. So we had to come up with a sequence to make sure all erosion sediment controls work properly, and we can also maintain an area for a temporary sediment basin throughout the construction process. So in your plan set, at the end, you're going to have 3 additional sheets. There's sequencing sheets, and this is just, we've been doing this a lot for contractors to, basically, I hate to say it, but give them a cartoon as to sequencing and how they should be working this project. So it's going to start off with the upper left-hand box where basically we need to go out and we need to stake out the limits of the clearing for them, and then they will remove any of the existing vegetation within the proposed development area. 2 is install all the erosion sediment control measures that are shown on the plan. Most importantly here is in the, I'll say, the upper left corner, you'll see a rectangle with jagged lines through it. That's where we're proposing to put our temporary sediment basin. This is presently one of the lowest points on the property before it eventually discharges towards the wetlands. That area we picked because we can maintain a sediment basin through the majority of the construction process. So that would be installed first, and this will allow us an area to direct stormwater runoff during the construction process. 2 or 3, we'd actually go in and we'd actually excavate and put in the foundations for the 2 front buildings and the back building number 3, which is a 40,000 square foot building. Step number 4 would be to install our stormwater drainage system, including the stormwater management basin. Now, it's important to note when you're constructing a stormwater system, initially, your top of your frames, your catch basins, are about 18 inches higher than the surrounding ground. That's the way it's going to be maintained while they're doing all of their mass earthwork grading. They will be higher, and when they get brought up near to the grade of the actual catch basin, then eventually there'll be what we call a inlet protection put on it, such as hay bales around the catch basins or a silt sack within the catch basin. So this will allow the storm drainage to be constructed, the stormwater basin to be graded and stabilized as other work goes on in the property, and that temporary sediment basin could stay in place, allowing us to direct water to it. Next, step number 5, we would actually go and install the utilities on the site. As I mentioned, the sewer line is going to come in the southeast corner of the property. That's actually a high point. So that's where the sewer line presently ends in front of the site. To get to that sewer, we're going to have a low-pressure force main, which consists of a individual injection pump or grinder pump for each one of the buildings. It would go through a low-pressure force main through the center of the rear parking area and eventually tying into a gravity lateral out near Brook Street. We'd also be installing a water line. That water line is going to come in along the west or left side of the project, then run down the center between the 2 buildings, providing fire service and additionally potable water or drinking water to each one of the buildings. Once all the utilities are in and the mass disturbance is done, then we can go in step number 6 and we can actually put in our process stone. We can pave the parking lot, put in our curbing and any concrete sidewalks that are necessary. Then we continue on to number 7. Important step is once all the pavement's in, the buildings are in, then we can topsoil, seed, and stabilize the disturbed areas around the first 3 buildings. Once everything is stabilized, sorry.
I'm sorry, I just have a question. Go ahead. On number 5, it says install site utilities, Ts, and stubs to building number 5. Which building did you really mean, since we only?
No, it's building number 5. So I apologize. What I should explain is we're going to be putting in the mains for the overall project. We're bringing the individual laterals to the new buildings, but while we're putting the mains in, we're going to bring stubs towards building number 5.
There is no building number 4 buildings.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Little building here.
Yeah, you're 100% correct. I'm sorry.
is that
Because
4?
it's 4, correct.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
That's all.
I'm
Oh,
sorry.
it should be 4?
We should have changed it to number 4. I apologize about that.
Okay, because in the plan too, it says 5.
Yeah, you're
Okay, so it
100%
is
right.
4. Okay.
That's one thing this was a prior sequence, and I just didn't update that note. Someone else in the office didn't update the note. Apologize. So once the disturbed areas are stabilized, at that point, we'll be safe in removing that temporary sediment basin. Once the sediment basin is gone, this is number 8, then we can construct building number 4. It's labeled as number 5 here, but we can go and construct building at number 4 at that point. We'll have a minimal area of disturbance around that building, and then we can go forward and continue, and we can complete the paving around that building. Again, the stubs are already past the paved area for the other portion of the project. And the final step is to do our final grading of the remaining disturbed area around building number 4. And then it'll be completion of the project. So it technically is going to be phased, but the building 5 or building 4 is the one that's really going to be phased out as a portion of this project. So what does this mean for disturbances on the site? This is a prior plan that we submitted to you. Again, we were originally looking at 2 regulated activities. Activity number 1 was for the construction of building number 3 and 4, the retaining wall, portion of the drainage system, and then also the paved area associated with those driveways for the total area of 1,592 square feet. That has been entirely eliminated at this point. The only remaining activity in the upland review area would consist of the construction of the berm for the stormwater basin, the outlet, and some minor clearing of the canopy line associated with the construction of that outlet for a total activity of about 4,377 square feet. So if I go to the revised plan, you can see, the highlighted area is the only remaining regulated activity we have. We are proposing no direct impacts into the wetlands area at all associated with the project, and we also feel that we've significantly reduced the amount of clearing, especially of the trunk line of trees associated with this project. Now, the other thing that's occurred, and unfortunately, it's a bad week for a meeting because most everyone's on vacation. So I get to play soil scientist. Sorry, Scott, but I'll do my best. We had Matt Davison of the Davison Environmental finalize their environmental impact assessment. A couple things that he wanted me to bring up. Scott, I think you previously had a question about the type of soil that's associated with the wetlands. So see if I get this right. There's 2 kind of wetland soils in that area. There's a Saco, and then there's also a Raypole. My understanding is the Raypole is along the further edge of the wetlands, so the outside edge of the wetlands, further away the brook. Basically, as explained to me, is that this is basically an area of floodplain outwash soils sitting over sands and gravels. And as you get closer to the brook, that's where you get the Sacos, where you have the deeper wetlands and muck-type soils up against the brook itself. So that's why you see a discrepancy in the 2 soil types. So you do have a Saco and a Raypole in there. In addition to, we had mentioned that when we checked natural diversity database mapping, there was a lot of shaded areas along all of Dividend Brook. So they did go out and they researched it a little bit more. And when they inquired to DEP, what they found is there's a possible presence of box turtles, which is commonly what we find in this area when we did O'Leary Farms, other projects on the other side of Brook Street. This is what we encountered. And also in this area, there's a potential for, I think it was tide mucket, which is a freshwater mussel that tends to be along medium to larger sized watercourses, especially ones that are associated with the Connecticut River. In talking to Eric Davison of Davison Environmental, who's our wildlife biologist, there was some recommendations. Those recommendations are included in your report. Typically, on all other projects, one of the first things that would happen with the box turtle is that you need to basically circumference the entire area with some type of fencing to keep box turtles from entering into harm's way during construction. Once that fencing's in place, they go and they basically scour the site, see if they can find any box turtles. If there are any box turtles present, they pick them up and move them to the other side of the fence. Appropriately train the construction personnel on the site that if there is any box turtles found during construction, to actually pick them up during the construction process and to make sure they're out of harm's way on the other side of the site. In addition to There is a recommendation because box turtles can tend to go up into the fields and use it as habitat. There's a recommendation that we propose to create some turtle habitat within the site. On the plan that I have up before you, you'll see 2 areas outlined in yellow. These are areas that Eric recommended that we look at incorporating some turtle habitat. What is proposed to happen in these areas is that we would, basically they want me to do is put down a layer of filter fabric. Then they want me to put a layer of about 15 inches of a coarse sand or gravel or some type of appropriate material as directed by them. And then we're going to plant that area. Let's see if I can get my cheat sheet notes here, sorry. Yeah, so he wants us to plant that area with a warm seasonal grass mix offered by New England Wetlands Plants. In addition to, there is an additional recommendation that other disturbed areas around our limits of disturbance, we also use the same mix along that area. In addition to, within the yellow outline polygons on this, is also a recommendation that we plant some small shrubs. He has a list of shrubs that are included in his report. I've talked to the developer of this project, and we are more than willing to do that as a conditional approval. We can gladly incorporate that on the final plans and ensure that it happens. My understanding of the habitat for the tidal mucket is that the biggest thing is you don't want to change their environment. By revising the site plan and eliminating a lot of the clearing that was going on, we're keeping it very similar to what it was. In addition to things you got to be concerned about is thermal change of the runoff going to the wetlands area and watercourse by revising the stormwater basins to get about up to a 25-year storm event to actually infiltrate in. We've achieved that also by going into the groundwater rather than direct discharge into the wetlands. We were able to keep the thermal dynamics of the water very similar to what's going on today. So I've been working with Eric and Matt a while on this. I apologize. It's kind of taken a while together. We kind of really had to go back and redo the whole plan after we got all our information together over the past month. But we're still working with them and gladly, incorporate anything they have to make this a nice and viable project. Scott, I think you also had a question about floodplains. I don't know if I adequately answered that last time. This is a copy of the FEMA map for this area. I think what I represented to you last time is I thought this area was in what we call an A zone. So it's a flood zone that's associated, 100-year flood zone without a elevation associated with it. It's actually not even in an A zone. It's actually, the brown area on this is actually considered, it's basically an X zone, so it's either an area of 500-year event, 2% chance of reoccurrence, or it's a 100-year where you have less than a foot of inundation during a flood event. So there is a flood zone back there, but it's not a 100-year flood zone. And I think you might have been asking based upon the soil type that was out there, because whether it was a floodplain soil or not. So I just wanted to make sure I'm clear on that. The final thing you had asked me to do was to have the property checked for pesticides. This is the thing that kind of took a while to pull together. Just flip back a couple pages. Participate computer. So actually, I'm better off on the site photo. Okay, there we go. So we hired GeoQuest to go out there, who's a licensed environmental professional company, and go out and take some soil samples. As we know, with the agricultural past uses of these properties and all the properties in the area, there was definitely a use of pesticides. What they did is they went out and they grabbed 10 samples around the entire site, scattered, basically evenly scattered throughout the site. What was found, of course, is there are pesticides out there. What they encountered was, again, I got to get to my cheat sheet here, DDT and dieldrin, which are two typicals that we find in these areas. working with other properties of the different nurseries that were in this area and different farms, that's what we typically found. What we found is they do not exceed the commercial industrial threshold requirements. There was one area, that's why I bring up this photo, behind the existing house, you can see there's like an old orchard right behind the house where I'm blowing up right now. This area did exceed the requirements for residential. And in talking to our LEP on this project, was indicated as we change the use of this property, the overall property, to commercial industrial, would be okay. We're not going to exceed the requirements. So it is proposed with the development of this property, we'd be changing the entire use to industrial. The other things we need to deal with, the biggest thing is we don't want to remove the soil from the site. We're okay if we leave it on the site. So we've actually, on these plans, we actually had to adjust the grades, everything up a foot, to ensure we have no export of material off the site. In addition to, as we proposed originally, we're proposing to build some berms around the perimeter. So a portion of that material will go into the berms because the pesticides are typically within the top 10 inches of soil. So it's basically the topsoil you're going to scrape off. That would be used for berms, used for landscaped areas, and then it would all remain on site. What I bring up about the portion behind the residential, it is at a higher level. It looks like they were using some pesticides on that orchard at one time. The recommendation is when we're doing our construction that we take that soil, mix it with the other soil, dilute it, to bring it down to an acceptable level so it meets industrial commercial thresholds, but once again to leave it on site and not remove it. And another important thing that they're recommending to us is that during construction, if it's a dry time of year, that it is continuously wet and watered down so don't get transport of the soils by blowing during the construction process. So that's another note that we'll add to the plan based upon recommendations from GeoQuest. So with that, I'm going to conclude my presentation and hopefully answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Jim. I would like to have it noted for the record that Jody, Commissioner O'Connor is not present this evening. Commissioner Kaplan will be voting in her place. Okay. Commissioner Kurz, do you have any questions?
No.
No. Commissioner Brown?
No questions.
Commissioner Stevens?
I'm glad that you're looking into the turtle thing, doing the proposed turtle mitigation or planting area. You do have the silt fence going up before construction starts. Can you do, I think you said you were going to do the sweep of the site with the biologists or Eric Davison, and that would be before any construction starts. And
Yeah, this is a recommend. You can see that this recommendation is coming over the weekend, so that'd be another thing I'm going to add to that,
so
to that
he'd
sequence.
move the turtles out before any construction
Correct.
starts. Okay. I think that's all I have.
Vice Chairman Whalen?
Just following through with the turtle, the box turtle. Have they been found on the property?
No. So in his report, what he says is, he initially was out there in September of last year. When this all came up, I sent them back out, but it was March. Really wasn't a good time to look for box turtles. I could tell you from doing several other projects in this area, we do encounter them. So I do anticipate we will find some, but we dealt with it in the past. I was involved with the apartment complex to the west of this, and also with O'Leary Farms down to the east of this, and some other properties across the street have had some involvement. So I'm well-versed, and I don't want to say well-versed, but, familiar with what needs to be done. I'll have Eric and Matt instruct the construction people on the site to what to do and what to look out for.
Madam Chair, Matt does say in his report that there were 2 nests found in the location where the proposed stormwater basin is going. He can't confirm that it's box turtles, but it says there's a high potential. So the project could potentially be impacting 2 turtle nests.
Going along with that, you're proposing some disturbance in inland wetland, upland review area for this turtle habitat to be built. Do you know how much square feet is going to be disturbed for the habitat?
Well, for the habitat, or for creating the habitat?
Creating.
Well, I have it all lumped into one. That's part of that 47, I think I said 4,700 square feet. It's basically, it was right at the toe of the slope for our detention basin, so it was already part of what we were proposing to disturb. So the area was about 4377 overall. I can break
Right.
it down into a separate area if you like.
Just curious, because it is a disturbance, of a separate area.
Yeah, but
For the
so again, we
turtles.
tucked it into like right into the toe, so it was part of what we were already proposing to have an activity in.
Okay. Just the berm again. Something you're going to do with the pesticide soil?
So
Into
it's-
the berms?
So what happens is the pesticides tend to be in that top 6 to 10 inches of soil, which is topsoil. So I can't use it as fill underneath buildings. It's not structurally stable. I can't use it underneath parking areas. It's topsoil. Most sites that don't have issues with pesticides, believe me, they would screen it and sell it and ship it off-site. We can't do that here. We do have some pretty significant areas of landscaping. We have the berms around the perimeter of this. So what I'm proposing to do, berm is a good place to put it. We don't have to worry about it being structural. So there's a berm along the front of the project and all down the west side of the project. So we're proposing to lose the majority of it in those berms. We've done it in several other projects in the past too, that way, where you can't get rid of it off-site. The other thing we've done is we build a large mound someplace, or the other option we've done is we've dug a hole and take the good material out and put this in. I don't think we need to do that here. I was going through some quantities, and I think we can lose it around the perimeter and the other landscape areas when it does some takeoffs on it.
One other question, the stormwater management, is that going to be gravity flow or pumped
Gravity.
when it's done? Okay, thank you.
There's gravity to it and infiltration out of it. Other than major storms, there's an outlet structure to regulate flow out. So it's all gravity.
Thank you.
Secretary Kelly.
Yes,
Oh, I forgot one thing.
my porous pavement.
Yes,
I was going to ask you about that.
sorry.
But, well, no, my question, Jim, I see you've included it, but the coloring, I'm looking at page 4A, and the coloring for the area of standard pavement and porous, they're so similar. Can you tell us, like,
We changed that. So this is a site plan. So what we're proposing is the outside edge of the parking spaces. So this is the front parking area.
just the front part?
So the way the parking lots are graded, the high point is at the building, and they're sloping away from the building. So especially along this particular side of the project, where we have the stormwater infiltration swale, you typically are going to put porous pavement where you have water run across it, so you get more water to infiltrate in it. If I put on the parking spaces up against the building, the only thing that could possibly go in is what falls, and some of that will actually run off too. So when we do it, I typically either create a low area or I put it around the on the lower edge of the parking where water can run across it. So I was proposing on this side. Unfortunately, in all the buildings, parking tends to be in front of it, so the water's running away. If you would like me to consider some additional locations, I don't like to put it in drive aisles. I find it doesn't last well in drive aisles. But if you'd like me to put up against the building, we can consider it. I did talk to
When you said dry what?
drive aisles,
Aisles.
the driveways for the
Drive aisles.
vehicles.
Excuse me, what?
The drive aisles, the
Drive
driveways.
aisles,
Yeah.
okay.
So where the trucks are going, the cars are going. I typically don't like to put it in drive aisles. I like to keep it in parking spaces. I mean, again, we can't offer it in those parking spaces in front of the building, but we're not going to get a lot of infiltration out of it because of the direction of the flow off it.
Is there a disadvantage to using it on the drive aisles?
Maintenance tends to break up sooner if you got heavy equipment going over it. It's not a great place to do it. Where you have lighter vehicles, cars, parking, less use, it's a better place to use it.
All right, so of course, as much as we'd like to see as much as possible, it doesn't make sense. That front row of parking is
Yeah, I
probably.
mean, so the alternate is, again, either we put porous pavement in those parking spaces, but it's not going to have a big advantage. Again, you're going to have water running off it. The only thing that's going to go in is what runs off, what falls directly on it. The other option is to change the direction of the grading, but I don't like to have water run up towards the building parking. I don't like to have water running along parking spaces. It's a winter icing problem. I like to have it run away as much as I possibly can. But if you really want it, then we can consider it in those parking spaces.
Really wanting it, versus being aware of the advantage of it.
Yeah, I mean, and again, this is the site to do it. But we've also tried to incorporate as many other measures to promote groundwater infiltration as we possibly can here. The sediment, the stormwater basin to the rear, in my calculations, is the only basin that I applied any infiltration value to in my model. We have an infiltration basin to the front, or infiltration swale to the front, and one to the side of the building. I did not incorporate infiltration, although it will. So there's a lot of infiltration going on here that's not even in the stormwater model, and now we have porous pavement on top of it too. So there's a lot of things we've done, we took advantage of on this particular site. Well, again, other than regrading the park space, I don't see it being.
Well, I
Beneficial.
appreciate you putting it there.
Yep.
I do have one other question, and it's about the berm. So can you give us a little more detail? How high is the berm? Especially, I'm thinking of the front, and will there be plantings
So-
on it?
Yes.
I mean, what's our view going to be from Brook Street?
So the berm, as I start on the far east end, so this is the east side of the driveway, it's not going to be that high. It's only going to be about 2 to 3 feet high on the east side. The issue we have is that to make this site work, when I first come in on the east side, I actually need to drop the grade down. We're going to be excavating out and lowering the grade. So on the north side of that berm, as I'm in the site looking back at the berm, that berm is actually about 7 to 8 feet high.
That's the back, the north side
On
is
the
the back.
back side, on the north side. On the road side, it's not as big. As I go down to the west side of the berm gets higher. The top of the berm is about elevation 143, and then the grade on either side is going to be like 140, 139, so it's about 4 feet high. It's not going to be a huge berm.
So are you
along
saying
the-
if you're on Brook Street, you're going to see a change in the height of it?
It's going to taper up from the east, and then it'll taper down. The Brook Street is very deceiving in that area. There's actually a pretty significant change in grade
Yeah.
from west to east, so it's following the grade of the road. But as I go further to the west, it will get slightly higher, not too much higher. So I'll bring it up is, one of the things that's causing that berm not to be high is we're also incorporating an infiltration swale on the backside of it. That, believe it or not, that infiltration swale takes up about 12 feet in width. If we did not have the infiltration swale and we relied strictly on the permeable pavement on that side, I could pick up the top of the berm elevation about another 3 feet. Because right now I'm going down and then need to come back up. Where if I went right from the edge of the park lot and can go, start climbing back up at a 3-to-1 slope, I could pick up at least another 2, possibly 3 feet to the top of that berm. Along the west side of the project, the berm is significantly higher. We start about elevation 139, 138, and then we go up to a high point of about 143 to 144. So you're talking about 4 or 5 feet high along that side, and it continues all the way down. It's going to undulate. It's going to be a little bit of a low spot towards center and increases in height as you go down to the far north end of it. We did work with the landscape architect. It is proposed that there's, on all the berms, there's going to be a series of deciduous trees, canopy trees, especially along Brook Street. What I asked them to do is to mimic what's directly across the street. So when you look at it, there's deciduous trees that are right along the back of the walkway. Then on the top of the berm, there's a series of shrubs. I think they have some hollies and some evergreens along. So we'll have the evergreens on the top of the berm. And then, especially down the west side of the project, along the entire top, there are a series of evergreen trees on the very top, along with every fourth one we're looking at putting a deciduous, like sugar maple or a white oak along the top.
And the evergreens would be native species.
So I actually, so the evergreen they were looking at was a white spruce. In the center of the list there is what they're looking at and putting on the top of the berm. And then the deciduous trees were the red maple, sugar maples, and then the sycamore and the white oak.
Okay, all right. Thank you for all that information. I'm all set, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Callan.
You answered, one of my questions was I didn't see the planting plan, so thank you. I think it's in this packet, or maybe I missed it. But, So I do want to make
Had
sure.
it been in that plan set that went out in the packets.
Oh, okay, okay.
I think that was completed after.
Okay, I am concerned about the potential for harming turtles, especially listed species.
Right.
I don't know if Matt has any suggestions on what can be done to excavate those nests or burrows or whatever to try. I guess he said they're nests, not actual like burrows, just nests.
Yeah, possible nest.
Okay, that's not the same thing as burrows. Okay. I guess I would just, I know that most of that work in where it was found is not necessarily in our review area, but I don't know if there's any way to put a condition or something that we can talk about it to, I don't know, to have some sort of monitor out there or something just to make sure I don't know, when you start doing the work, there's no eggs or anything that are, being harmed. I believe that would be a violation of the State Endangered Species Act if there are, so I just.
Well, we'll gladly take, have a condition that we continue to have Eric and Matt on the project, and they can watch it during the construction process.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah. and again,
Yeah,
do
I
we
mean,
can-
you don't even have to have the whole project, just, when you're in
We'll
that
gladly
area.
have report back to you.
Yeah.
Their findings.
Provide us a report with some photos or something, clearing that area, and then maybe, once the habitat area is created, just another little quick photo page and have brief memo or report just saying, hey, look,
Yeah.
we created this, it's done.
Yeah, so a good idea would be during the construction process, maybe like every couple of weeks to monitor and give you, number one, what they found, the creation of it, what happened after we created it, and then usually we'll do some type of longer term monitoring to see, if it actually works, if it becomes viable, and put like a 2 or 3 year time frame of monitoring post construction to make sure if what we said we we're going to do, actually did something.
Yeah, that sounds great. I think that sounds good. I mean, I'm not pushing for 2 to 3 years of monitoring reports for us, but if you, at least to show that it's been built, I know Matt and Eric are really good at, are,
Right.
state-known herpetologists. And then, the other question I had, sorry. Berms planted, you talked about that. Oh, with the sequencing of the site, is the entire site, I mean, at first I think you might have asked this, immediately surrounded by erosion controls, and it's
Yes.
gonna stay, the silt fencing, it's gonna stay,
All-
it's not gonna
all
be
the-
like this area.
yeah, all the
that's-
perimeter, we'll stake out the perimeter.
Okay.
We'll put up, at this point, it's going to not to be just be a silt fence, but a circumference the entire property for a turtle barrier. And that'll be maintained throughout the entire construction process. And all I wanted to show is that, we're building we'll call it 5, is correct, number 5 is now, that's going to be my sediment basin, and we've been able to work the whole site around so we can keep that sediment basin in place until we're, most of this development is done. And then when we have minimal disturbance left, then we can remove it and build that last building.
Okay, sounds good. Those are my questions, thank you.
Commissioner Schweitzer?
All right, not much really. You do reference the State of Connecticut Form 817. They're up to 818. Just check the notes, make sure nothing's changed.
Okay.
And then you said with your storm system, you're installing that first, so it's only that pipe in the center that you made a Class 5 that you're worried about them driving over?
Yes.
All the remainders, all set. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim, just a quick question. First of all, comment. Thank you. Thank you very much. You make everything easy for us.
I would give credit to the client, who was very accommodating and
Good.
was willing to work with us, and I think we end up with a good project in the end.
Good, yes. Second thing, with all that heavy rain we had, I noticed that the wetlands in the back, because of being in Altera, were rather high. Highest I've ever seen it. Do you know approximately where it came up on the site?
I do not. I mean, reference point are the wetlands flags that we have out there. If you saw them come past the wetlands flags, which are pretty significantly past the watercourse, that I can tell you right now, and looking at it, most of the wetlands flags are at about elevation 127.
Okay.
They're pretty consistent through there. So again, that was another kind of looking at our soil testing and not finding groundwater. Our bottom of our shallowest, our deepest test pit was about 128, and we didn't see anything. But if you do see water come up past that flag, it'd be really interesting. I don't think it does.
Yeah, I was just curious because, like I said, that was the highest I've ever seen the water down there in that wetlands.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting if there's something going on downstream, blockage, that could, beaver dam or something.
Yeah.
Pesky
Yeah.
beavers.
I'll keep an eye on it. I haven't seen it as high as I
it's
did after
interesting.
that heavy rain that we had a couple weeks ago or so.
Again, once I looked at Scott's question about the floodplain, I found it interesting that, is that, again, it's either called a 500-year, it's a 0.2 chance of reoccurrence, so that's a 500-year event, or it's 100 that could have up to less than a foot of inundation during a 100-year event. So it's not like a huge 100-year floodplain, but it's a very broad area. And looking at the topography, so I can imagine seeing the water fluctuate up and down a foot in that area.
Sure.
I walked back there. I didn't see any indication of water coming up to those wetlands flags from what I've seen recently. So I think it's still pretty far away from this site.
Perfect. Okay, great. Just a quick question, just for my own knowledge. Approximately how far from that berm to the front of the berm to the sidewalk to the street is it going to be? I'm just thinking sight line of coming out of Altera or even
So
some of the
berm- So
other.
you got, here's a blow up of that driveway. Here's a good example. You have a very wide right-of-way back there. I don't know if you realize, but back in the days, it's actually a state highway. They got turned over to the town. So I believe the right-of-way width here is actually about 100 feet when typical town roads are 60 to 50 feet.
Okay.
So I don't have an exact dimension here, but I could tell you you're probably at least 25 feet back to the front property line, in addition to the berm slopes from that front property line up. A good reference point is, and the reason I'm blowing up this little photo is you can see for Altera, there's the identification sign that's on that easterlymost driveway. So that berm kind of lines up with that identification sign. So if that identification sign is not blocking your sight line leaving that driveway, that berm is not going to block the sight
Perfect.
line leaving the driveway.
Perfect. And you're going to use the existing cutouts for the entrances? The one that's already there and
So
then
this driveway, you can see a gray line just underneath it. It's in a similar location. It's not the exact location. If I blow up a little bit, you can see the dashed gray lines.
Okay.
That's about where that existing driveway is today.
Okay. And then on the other end, you're going to use the existing driveway for the residential?
Again, it's in a similar
Similar?
location.
Okay.
You can, once again, if I blow up on it, you can see the gray lines underneath. That's
very-
where the existing driveway is.
Perfect. Okay. I have no further questions. Okay, can I get a motion, please?
I'll make a motion to approve the Brook Street Rocky Hill LLC construction of parking area, portion of building, retaining wall.
If you want to take the
Nope.
retaining wall out of it, strike that.
Level spreader and grading located at 553, 565, and 595 Brook Street. Assessors ID 1704, 005, and 16278.
Second?
Second.
Do we add any conditions now before we vote?
Now,
Just discussion first.
Sorry.
That's okay. Okay, discussion?
I'd like to add a condition for, I guess an initial, like a monitoring report or something during construction to ensure no turtles or eggs are harmed during construction.
Sure, if we could go ahead and have, like you said, have Matt or Eric be on site, and then just report every couple of weeks or so.
Sure.
Just a quick little, whether they've seen turtles or nests or additional nests or eggs.
Yep.
And then staff will go ahead and then relay that to
Also,
us as needed.
Once the habitat area gets created, we know
Correct.
and inspect it and give you a report on that too.
Yes, please, yes.
And would those inspections by other biologists or the herpetologists or whatever you want to call them, that would be after the silt fence is installed, and that would be before any, like, new phase of construction starts?
Correct.
And they would sweep the whole site?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, perfect. So they will add that as a friendly addendum. Okay.
And then the habitat, after the habitat is built, a report for that. The turtle habitat.
Okay. Anything else? Any other discussion? Okay, let's go ahead and vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No.
Thank you for your time.
Congratulations.
Very
Thank you.
nice. Very
You.
nice.
Again, thank you, you and the owner. Thank you. Next on the agenda is Cisco Connecticut LLC. I see they've asked for an extension.
Yes, we received a letter from their engineer, Pete Parent, requesting a 65-day extension to their application that's pending, as they're trying to work with Cromwell. I haven't seen any action by Cromwell yet on the application either.
Okay. Can I get a motion on this, whether to extend it, or do we need to vote on this? To extend it, yeah, good.
So motion to table or to extend?
To provide a 65-day extension.
I make a motion to provide a 65-day extension to Cisco Connecticut LLC, construction of new access driveway with guardhouse and truck parking located at 1355 Cromwell Avenue, Assessor's ID 20-009.
Second? Discussion? Hearing none? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so they have been granted a 65-day extension.
So then you can table it.
Yep, and that will be tabled to, well, they're saying they want it to be tabled to the May meeting.
65 days from when they first presented it?
Today's
now?
64 days, yeah.
Huh?
Today is 64 days.
Starting today?
Well, today, we're at day 64, so they would have needed a decision tonight or an extension.
Right.
So we're going to
okay.
hear them in May?
So they're tabled, they want it tabled to the May 17th meeting. So we'll go ahead and table it to the May 17th, 2023 meeting.
May 10th.
May 10.
May 10th, is that when it is? Okay.
17th P and Z.
Oh.
Got it, okay. Okay. Actions taken, minutes presented for approval for the March 8, 2023 meeting. Can I get a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes from the March 8th meeting.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nope. Okay, passed. Okay, discussion, plan of conservation and development.
Nothing?
Nothing. Status report, various projects.
Things are gearing up right now for the spring. Dakota's, they're doing some additional geotechnical testing prior to starting the building. The old building is down. The Kelson Row, the former Ames site, they're waiting. They have all building permits in place. They're waiting for their OSTA sign-off from the state, which should be this week or next week, and then construction of the foundations and buildings will begin. Belden Lane, we're preparing specs and that to go out to bid. I don't have an anticipated date on that yet, so.
Okay. What about across the street? What's going on across the street from Dakota's? That where that hotel is supposed to go
They,
and on 91?
They applied to planning and zoning for a zone change to change that from commercial to regional commercial, and that was approved. Basically, the requirements they do have an approved plan, which is still valid, the hotel and restaurant. The standards are the same, it just allows them a little more flexibility in permitted uses. For instance, it could be a drive-through restaurant instead of a sit-down restaurant.
Okay. Have we heard anything more from Vessel?
No, other than, I have not heard anything from the attorney yet as far as the response. And then, as it moves forward, I had asked the attorney to possibly meet with the commission in executive session for his brief, in regards to his brief, once his brief's prepared, and he agreed to that. Submitting the record for the planning and zoning appeal. We did meet with Josh Levy of Vessel to discuss alternative sites, but I don't know if that would be in addition to the Main Street site or instead of.
Okay.
In addition,
I-
he wants to give us two.
No,
I read an article recently that they are targeting Rocky Hill.
They are. They're targeting Connecticut, period.
Yes, they are.
And they're getting pushed back in Simsbury now, too.
A bunch of cities, yeah.
Yep, okay. Open space?
Nothing?
Can I ask something about that? The Sustainable Group, I know they've got a lot of ideas, and one of the things is an invasive species management for all of our public areas. But that would be something that they would need to talk to us about, right?
Depends
are-
where it is. I mean, if it's like multiflora rose in the midst of the trails, and it doesn't affect wetlands.
Right, it's not in our upland review
Right.
area or anything like that. Okay, just curious. They have a lot of ideas, and there are a lot of, grants and things like that that are available that I didn't know if we could assist with or, be a part of, and discussing those sort of things with them and the other groups.
Well, maybe our open space hat, we
Yeah,
put that on.
that's what I'm saying. We
Yeah,
are open
okay,
space
yeah.
hat, so it's something we need to talk about, I think, as a group and as a town. There are lots of funding out there for us to do things like even the Belden Lane culvert. We probably could have gotten money for that from the government. Yes, there is sometimes matching, but, you make a good case of watershed improvement or, climate resiliency or anything, like that, and you can get some good money. So it's something that we should be looking at and discussing, and I'm happy to provide some guidance or assistance with
Great.
that if needed. Yeah.
Thank you. Legislation?
nothing.
Conferences?
Nothing. I would just like to go back one item I
Sure.
forgot to mention is that we have, I believe the contract's been signed to initiate the site assessment, the Phase 1 assessment at 35, 45, and 55 Evans Road. And the firm that was selected was Ty and Bond.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, correspondence and communications?
The only correspondence was from the engineer in regards to the Cisco application.
Okay. Other business?
Madam Chair,
Sure.
I will not be at the next meeting, just letting you know.
Okay. Thank you for letting me know. Okay,
Oh, I
Yes.
apologize. One item, we did get a notification from Cromwell for a project that was in your packet, for a project that's across the street on the south side of County Line Drive. It's somewhat across the street from the Cisco project, and it had some wetlands to the rear. There.
Yeah, I saw that.
I provided a few of the plan sheets and then their application as well.
Right up against the wetlands. Oh, wait, no, wait, wait.
okay. So they're just looking to make us aware of this, too,
Yeah,
right?
it's a notification requirement. They're within 500 feet of an adjoining municipality.
Okay,
There's no action necessary. And one last item to add is that Kim Ritchie returned yesterday
Oh, nice.
ahead of schedule, so we make my life a little easier.
well, that's always good
She's
to
doing
make your
very
life
well.
easier. Good, good. Okay, if there's nothing else, motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second?
All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you.